Hello everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Today, I am going to discuss important topics that we, future educators, can use with our pupils or students. Are you ready to learn? Let's go! Today, I am going to talk about the part 3 of facilitating learning, which is focus on learning. I am going to focus on behaviorism of Pavlov, Thorndike, Watson, and Skinner, as well as the Gestalt psychology. The theory of behaviorism focuses on the study of observable and measurable behavior. It emphasizes that behavior is mostly learned through conditioning and reinforcement, rewards and punishment. It does not give much attention to the mind and the possibility of thought processes occurring in the mind. Contribution in the development of the behaviorist theory largely came from Pavlov, Watson, Thorndike, and Skinner. Let's start with Ivan Pavlov. He is a Russian physiologist and is well known for his work in classical conditioning or stimulus substitution. Pavlov was renowned in his experiment involved meat, a dog, and a bell. Initially, Pavlov was measuring the dog's salivation in order to study digestion. This is when he stumbled upon classical conditioning. This is Pavlov's experiment. Before conditioning, ringing the bell with neutral stimulus caused no response from the dog. Placing food or the unconditioned stimulus in front of the dog initiated salivation, unconditioned response. During conditioning, the bell was rung a few seconds before the dog was presented with the food. After conditioning, the ringing of the bell or conditioned stimulus alone produced salivation, which is conditioned response. This is a classical conditioning. Pavlov also found the following. Stimulus generalization. Once the dog has learned to salivate at the sound of the bell, it will salivate at other similar sounds. Extinction. If you stop pairing the bell with the food, salivation will eventually cease in response to the bell. Spontaneous recovery. Extinguished responses can be recovered after an elapsed time, but will soon extinguish again if the dog is not presented with the food. Discrimination. The dog could learn to discriminate between similar bells or stimuli and discern which bell would result in the presentation of food and which would not. Higher order conditioning. Once the dog has been conditioned to associate the bell with food, another unconditioned stimulus, such as a light, may be flashed at the same time that the bell is rung. Eventually, the dog will salivate at the flash of the light without the sound of the bell. Example situations. Just like how we encounter objects in the present, we somehow remember our teacher because we were conditioned to associate it when they are still our teacher. Just like her favorite dress that she wore every Friday. Like that, when you see something similar like that in the present, you will remember your teacher. Like, oh, that's kind of like teacher's blah blah favorite dress. She wore it every Friday when we have class. Just like that. Second, Teachers are able to apply classical conditioning in the class by creating a positive classroom environment to help students overcome anxiety or fear. Pairing an anxiety-provoking situation, such as performing in front of a group with pleasant surroundings, helps the student learn new associations. Instead of feeling anxious and tense in these situations, the child will learn to stay relaxed and calm. Third, a teacher claps out a pattern. Students repeat the pattern while focusing their attention to the teacher. Now, we are going to proceed with Edward L. Thorndike, his connectionism theory. He gave us the original SR framework of behavioral psychology in his book Educational Psychology. He explained that learning is the result of associations forming between stimuli and responses. Such associations or habits become strengthened or weakened by the nature and frequency of the SR pairings. The model for SR theory was trial and error learning, in which certain responses came to be repeated more than others because of rewards. The main principle of connectionism, like all behavioral theory, was that learning could be adequately explained without considering any unobservable internal states. Thorndike's theory on connectionism states that learning has takes place when a strong connection or bond between stimulus and response is formed. He came up with three primary laws. The first one is law of effect. This law states that a connection between a stimulus and response is strengthened when the consequence is positive, or the reward, and the connection between stimulus and the response is weakened when the consequence is negative, or punishment. But Thorndike revised this theory because he found out that not all reward are create strong bond, and not all punishments can weaken the connection between the stimulus and the response. A teacher can apply the law of effect by engaging students in hands-on, inquiry-based, and relevant learning activities, which provide intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic rewards, like trinkets, praise, and recognition, are motivating, but can actually reduce engagement over time. So, be careful. Providing students with unpleasant consequence for failure, such as missing out of a preferred activity when homework is not completed, is negatively extrinsic. If a student makes the choice that he or she enjoys the defiant feeling associated with not meeting the teacher's expectation, it is negatively intrinsic. The second law is law of exercise. This tells us that the more an SR or stimulus-response bond is practiced, the stronger it will become. However, this law had to be revised when Thorndike found that practice without feedback does not necessarily enhance performance. Using the law of exercise in a classroom requires a teacher to help students practice skills so that the skills is reinforced. In other words, teaching a concept briefly in September will not fully prepare that student for the state test in April. Students need to continually practice and build on the skills they are taught. Another example is that when you are joining a contest, For example, a math contest in the math subject. The teacher needs or has to guide his or her students so that the student will practice his or her skills in math and eventually win the competition. The third law is the law of readiness. This states that the more readiness the learner has to respond to the stimulus, the stronger will be the bond between them. When a person is ready to respond to a stimulus and is not made to respond, it becomes annoying to the person. For example, if the teacher says, "Okay, we will now watch the movie," which is the stimulus you've been waiting for, and suddenly the power goes off, the students will feel frustrated because they were ready to respond to the stimulus but was prevented to do so. Likewise, if the person is not ready at all to respond to a stimuli and is asked to respond, that also becomes annoying. For instance, the teacher asked a student to stand up and recite, and then the teacher asks the question and expects the students to respond right away when he is still not ready. This will be annoying to the student. That is why teachers should remember to say the question first and wait for a few seconds before calling on anyone to answer. That is the law of readiness. Here are some of the principles derived from Thorndike's connectionism. First, learning requires both practice and rewards, which is in the laws of effect and exercise. A series of SR connections can be chained together if they belong to the same action sequence, which is law of readiness. Transfer of learning occurs because of previously encountered situations. Intelligence is a function of the number of connections learned. So those are according to the connectionism. Let's proceed now to John B. Watson. He is the first American psychologist to work with Pavlov's idea. He too was initially involved in animal studies, then later became involved in human behavior research. He considered that humans are born with a few reflexes and the emotional reactions of love and rage. All other behaviors is learned through stimulus-response associations through conditioning. Watson applied classical conditioning in his experiment concerning Albert, a young child and a rat. In the beginning, Albert was not afraid of the rat, but Watson made a sudden noise each time Albert touched the rat. Because Albert was frightened by the loud noise, he soon became conditioned to fear and avoid the rat. Later, the child's response was generalized to other small animals. Now, he was also afraid of small animals. Watson then extinguished or made the child unlearn fear by showing the rat without loud noise. Watson believed that this proved that emotions could become conditioned responses. Watson is best known for taking his theory of behaviorism and applying it to child development. He believed strongly that a child's environment is the factor that shapes behaviors over their genetic makeup or natural temperament. Watson is famous for saying that he could take a dozen healthy infants and train any one of them to become any type of specialist he might select: doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant chief, and yes, even beggarman and thief. In other words, he believed that you can expose the child to certain environmental forces and over time condition the child to become any type of person you want. The last person in behaviorism theory is Burroughs Frederick Skinner. Like Pavlov, Watson, and Thorndike, Skinner believed in the stimulus-response pattern of conditioned behavior. Operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is based upon the notion that learning is a result of change in overt behavior. That is his theory. Changes in behavior are the result of an individual's response to events or stimuli that occur in the environment. A response produces a consequence such as defining a word, hitting a ball, or solving a math problem. When a particular stimulus response or SR pattern is reinforced or rewarded, the individual is conditioned to respond. Reinforcement is the key element in Skinner's SR theory. A reinforcer is anything that strengthens the desired response. There is a positive reinforcer and a negative reinforcer. A positive reinforcer is any stimulus that is given or added to increase the response. Example: a teacher promises extra time in the play area to children who behave well during the lesson. Verbal praises, star, stamps, and stickers are also examples of it. Second, a negative reinforcer. It is any stimulus that results in the increased frequency of a response when it is drawn or removed. A negative reinforcer is not a punishment. In fact, it is a reward. Example: a teacher announces that whoever gets a perfect score in the oral recitation will no longer take the final examination. The negative reinforcer is removing the final exam, which is a form of reward, right? How to use operant conditioning in your classroom. Operant conditioning encourages positive reinforcement, which can be applied in the classroom environment to get the good behavior you want and need from your pupils. Skinner's theory of operant conditioning uses both positive and negative reinforcements to encourage good and wanted behavior without deterring bad and unwanted behavior. Used in a variety of situations, operant conditioning has been found to be particularly effective in the classroom environment. One of the main ways of reinforcing a behavior is through praise, as the following example. In an elementary classroom, for instance, during listening time on the carpet, pupils are required to remain quiet and put their hand up when they want to make a vocal contribution to the class. When a child manages to sit and behave in that exemplary way, the teacher may say, "Great effort, Jamie," or "Well done, Louis," just like I asked. Undoubtedly, the student will feel pleased with themselves after getting such a positive response. The feeling of pride and self-satisfaction is one they are going to want to emulate in the future, and so they are likely to behave well during listening time from here onwards. Reminder: rewards may be used occasionally on a similar effect, but shouldn't be overused. as it is important to prevent the child from developing a dependency. If they become too adjusted to getting sweets, for example, they may eventually struggle to act in the same way without being presented with such a treat. As teachers, we should be mindful in using the power of reward because the pupils or students may not want to learn the lessons when there is no reward. They should learn the lesson or work hard in an activity not mainly because of the reward, but with the purpose of learning and because he or she is enjoying doing the task and learning the activity or the lesson. By building operant conditioning techniques into lesson plans, it is easily possible to teach children useful skills as well as good behaviors by using symbols like smiley faces, good work stamps, stickers, and even simple ticks. When a child does something correctly, you are encouraging them to repeat such satisfying work again further down the line. You could even use this type of reinforcement when teaching a student something totally new, like how to spell a particular word. When they do it correctly, you can administer praise to ingrain the message that they've done it right. By doing the opposite when they don't get it exactly correct, you can tempt them away from doing it this way in the future. In effect, the process is all about nurturing the student and aiding them in their development. With a good attitude and positive approach, it really can be done. Okay? In conclusion, classroom management can be conceived as a subset of behaviorism. Human beings, according to behaviorists, are fully formed by their surroundings. You can change a person's thoughts, feelings, and behavior by changing their environment. The system is built on incentives and penalties, or rewards and punishment. Teachers who provide positive reinforcement or rewards whenever students do a desirable action, according to behaviorists, will train them to perform the behavior on their own. Punishments are treated in the same way. People, according to behaviorists, respond in reaction to physical stimuli created either inwardly or externally. Human nature, they believe, is mostly a product of one's surroundings.